Good morning, everybody. I have decided I'm going to go ahead and make good on a promise to the folks at Detroit Speed and to Heights Engineering and review my Detroit Speed independent front suspension system. That's the entire front clip and the inner fenders. And then I'm also going to review my Heights independent rear suspension system. I'm going to break this up into two separate videos. We're going to do the Detroit Speed today, and then I'll upload the Heights video as a separate video. I basically just wanted to do a little video and show these systems, tell you what I liked about them, what I didn't like about them, a little bit about the company that you purchased these things from, and then one of the last things that I'm going to do is put a GoPro inside the wheel well on the front and the rear of the car and go slalom the car through some cones and just show you these suspension systems in action so you can kind of get an idea of how well they work. This is some really expensive suspension components I've got on my car. The front and rear suspension for this car is well over $20,000. So I've got some really nice stuff, and I've got some stuff to say about it after putting about 800 miles on my car before I'm getting ready to tear it down, blast it, powder coat it, the whole 9 yards. So there we go. Now, I am not a professional builder speaking from decades of experience. So you guys that are planning on commenting down below and correcting me, those of you who are planning on being an a-hole about it, make your own video, set the record straight, because I don't know everything. Let me start by saying that I first installed a Heights independent front suspension system clip on the front of my car. Ended up deciding to change that out with Detroit Speed. There's videos all over my channel from way back in the day. Go check those out if you want to. First things first, the packaging. This Detroit Speed system arrived in really good condition. Everything was like shrink wrapped to a pallet. Everything was in great shape. There were no nicks or anything that weren't supposed to be there, like your, pre-powder coated control arms were in excellent condition. And one of the things that they did that was really interesting, they took like a hard cardboard material and ran it through some sort of a machine that kind of like expanded it. So you can see in this picture here, they had this packaging material that took up all of the space so nothing could bounce around. And as a result, everything arrived in great shape. Let's first talk about the things on the Detroit Speed system that I do like, and then we'll move along to the very few things that I dislike. Very first up on the list that I do like is the sway bar. The sway bar on this system is just absolutely massive. I recently got the chance to see a monster truck up close and underneath, and I'm telling you, the sway bar was pretty similar in size. This thing is absolutely huge. Next up that I do like, the JRI shocks on this thing. They ride really well. The craftsmanship of them appears to be just absolutely excellent. And I do like that they're very easily adjustable with this ring that you have right there. If you want to know what they ride like, take a ride in a C7 Z06. Pretty much the same thing. Any of you who follow my channel know I'm a fabricator, and so I appreciate beautiful welds. Got some really, really nice TIG welds on this thing. Have a look right there for a good example. Just really, really nice welds. Most everybody out there is making their front clips out of rectangular tubing. Not the folks at Detroit Speed. They're using a hydroforming process that results in a front clip that just doesn't have a bunch of 90-degree angles to it. It's a very OE look, if you will, and everything has just a really nice aesthetic appeal to it, and I really appreciate that. Based on my research, Detroit Speed is the only company out there that is making their front spindles out of aluminum. I really like the look of the aluminum front spindle, and I appreciate that it will never rust. That's just cool to me. If you spend much time looking at the manuals for front suspension systems, you'll come to find very quickly that the manual from Detroit Speed is really a significant step above everyone else's. And I'll give you a great example of that. They give you this chart right here telling you that you can run a 17-inch wheel, 8.5 inches wide with 4 3/4 inches of back spacing. And if you put a 245/40 17 tire on there, that's the maximum width tire that you're going to get on their front suspension system. Nobody else does that. I've never seen another manufacturer that goes as far as to do all of the legwork for you so you don't order the wrong size wheels. Just everything is very, very thorough. They give you the specs of everything, the torque specs of everything, which again, a lot of manufacturers don't do. I even got my own dyno printout right here to my my JRI shocks. They go the extra mile, and I really appreciate that. You can't really see that the control arms are a work of art, but just take my word for it. I've got them covered in, some really cheap masking tape that I've done since day one to protect them in the build process. I can tell you something. There's a difference between cheap masking tape and good masking tape. Don't do what I've done and use the cheap Walmart crap. That stuff comes off very difficult and leaves a really hard residue that will be there. It seems like forever. It's terrible to get it off. Use good masking tape. If you're digging on my 14-inch 6-piston Wilwood front brakes, I'll put a link in the end of this video to another video that I did with some really great information that I learned. Save you a lot of trouble on those brakes. Earlier, I showed you that chart in the manual that will tell you what size tire that you could put on the unit. Don't do what I did and try and outsmart Detroit Speed. I'm now having to run spacers on the front end of my car because I tried to put something a little wider in there than I should have. And yes, I'm going to change that out with a quality spacer when the build process is done. Next, let's talk about the inner fenders. We'll have a look at them here from the inside. You can see that I'm obviously using those bracing bars right there as like something almost like a loom to be able to run my wires through the firewall and kind of route everything to the front of the car in a manner that's nice and works well. As a result, all of the wires are run behind the inner fender. Like for instance, that wire right there from my supercharger cooler pump just disappears right behind the inner fender, and I really like and appreciate that. Over here on the opposite side, you can see the heater lines, the electrical cords, the AC lines. Everything is run behind the Detroit Speed inner fender and, gives it a nice clean look. Let's now talk about the couple of things that I don't care for about this system. And this is not anything that's necessarily Detroit Speed's fault, but it's just kind of, how things occurred on my build. So the first thing that I want you to notice here, you see that recess in the firewall right there? I slid the motor back pretty much as far as I could using sliding engine mounts. And as a result, my motor is, closer towards the center of the car, and it leaves a huge amount of space right here for working on the accessory drive. And I really appreciate, a generous helping of space in this area here for working on the accessory drive on the front of the motor. As a result of doing that, my AC compressor, which would normally be mounted down there in the bottom, cannot be mounted down in the bottom. The space isn't there due to the cross member. And so when I mount my AC compressor up high, you can see here that I've had to build this recess into the inner fender in order to allow, enough space for the AC compressor. If we look kind of down in here, and you can't really see it, but take my word for it, down there in the bottom, you've got a -16 heater line down there, and I had to do another recess down in there for the heater line. If we come over here and we have a look at our brake and clutch master cylinder, look at how little space there is right there, right in between this fitting and the Detroit Speed inner fender. There's so little space right there that I'm going to have to build another recess into this inner fender, because right now I literally could not take that fitting off, and I could not take this master cylinder out unless this Detroit Speed inner fender was completely removed. Obviously, you don't want that, so I've got to build another recess right there. I don't have any idea what you would do if you were trying to run, a great big vacuum booster. I have no idea because the space is just not there. Let me now show you the only thing on this Detroit Speed independent front suspension system that I could regard as an actual flaw. Notice that I've put my angle gauge there on my cross member, and we're within a ½ a degree of being level sitting here on the car lift. I noticed when I first got this system that the frame rail right here was kind of leaning just ever so slightly, and I checked it with my angle gauge. Watch, if I take that and I put it, let's see here, get the magnetic side. There we go. We're about 3 degrees leaning in that direction right there. So I noticed when I first got it that just really only on this front horn from about here forward, it just wasn't a perfect, perpendicular 90 degrees. And as I looked at it and thought about it, I came to the conclusion that it really was just not going to matter on the build. I don't doubt Detroit Speed would have sent me a replacement, front clip if I had asked them to and sent this back. I just didn't feel like it was actually necessary to do that. But, if I've got to nitpick this system and find one imperfection, that's it. One thing that I'm not crazy about, if you look right there, you'll notice I've got myself a little bit of a power steering fluid leak. My power steering fittings, if I look up inside there you go, you can see them. That's where they are. They're behind the alternator, so it's not a big deal to remove the alternator to get to them. But let me tell you, once you remove that alternator, getting to those fittings is really, really difficult. There's no room at all to move a wrench up in there, and getting those fittings to seal has been really, really difficult. It's on my to-do list, but I have yet to figure out how I'm going to do it. It's a battle I'm still fighting. One thing that I've really come to appreciate, that you could stare at this independent front suspension system for 10 hours and you would never know about it, is the technical support that comes from Detroit Speed. Shout out to Keith over there, who has answered a lot of technical questions for me. I'm really appreciative when I call a place like this and A, I can get somebody on the phone very, very quickly, and B, they are competent and able to answer questions. Sometimes those guys over at Detroit Speed have said, Ian, I got to check, talk to somebody else, call you back, and then they actually do. Go figure. It's crazy, right? Anyways, I really appreciate the technical support at Detroit Speed. Those guys are doing a great job, and that is a seriously good reason why you should consider their front end. All right, ladies, I have got myself a bag of Amazon cones, and it's time to mount a GoPro up inside of the wheel well on this car and take it out and do a little bit of slaloming and show you how well the front suspension system does its job. All right, let's get down to business. I'm not sure what happened, but as I was trying to make my 180 and go back through, I pretty much lost the ability to steer. There's all kinds of fluid on the ground. Pretty sure I just blew a hydraulic line. Well, I figured out what happened, and it ain't good. Well, I only live about a quarter of a mile from here, which is great, because I only have just a little bit of hydraulic fluid left. Maybe, just maybe, I can pour it all in there and manage to drive this thing home. Definitely not shooting any video today underneath the car with the GoPros, but you know what? We'll come back another day. Well, I think I figured out where my power steering leak was coming from. Let me show you something. You see that red fitting right there? There ain't no line connected to it. Now, what should really worry you about that is the same fella who made that connection and that braided line also made the transmission oil cooler lines and the oil cooler lines. So, yeah, let me get that fixed. Well, everybody, that is where my GoPro video underneath showing you the suspension in action ends. As you might have guessed, I blew the damn hydraulic line yet again. Look underneath the car and you can see some fluid down underneath there. I'm really starting to wonder whether or not those jegs, braided line fittings are actually any decent. Starting to get to suspect that the folks over at Earl's that make really high-end fittings would probably laugh at that statement. I know you guys saw that collar on the sway bar just sit there clinkety clacking from side to side. As soon as I got back and watched that GoPro video, I thought, my God, they're going to tear me to pieces in the comments. Sure enough, well, you know, I thought, do I want to go back and try and reshoot it another day? And then I thought, you know, what the hell with that? Show everybody what this is really like, running a car through the ringer and working out all of the bugs. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of what I'm doing here. And so there you go. I learned a little something about my suspension system. My collar on my sway bar is not tight. Well, there you go. At the end of the day, this is a video reviewing the Detroit Speed independent front suspension system on my 67 Nova. I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. I can't give it a perfect 10 because it's not 100% perfect, but the truth is it's close enough to it. I give it a 9.5. I'm really happy with it. I would undoubtedly buy another one of those systems from them, as well as, frankly, anything else that they make. My experiences with Detroit Speed have been that they just make really fantastic stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed this. By all means, as a favor to me, you know, click subscribe down below, turn on notifications. If you got questions about this system, ask them below in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. Appreciate y'all watching. Y'all have a good one.